Madonna, best fucking live act. Fuck off.
Both were global icons who dominated the charts across decades. Both were fearless in pushing boundaries, and both were celebrated voices for the LGBTQ+ community. For years, fans assumed these two legends respected, if not adored, one another. After all, how could two titans of pop possibly be anything but friends? But behind the glossy magazine covers and carefully staged award show smiles, the truth told a far different story. Elton John often used his platform to deliver sharp jabs, once sneering at Madonna's live performances, and even going so far as to call her a fairground stripper during a 2004 awards speech. Madonna, for her part, rarely responded directly, letting silence, or the occasional sly on-stage quip, speak louder than any denial. By the time Madonna won a Golden Globe in 2012, the feud had become impossible to ignore. Elton's camp erupted publicly, fueling a media frenzy that split fans into rival camps. So what was this really? An unspoken alliance turned sour, or a rivalry always simmering beneath the surface? Were they ever true friends, or simply rivals dressed in the costume of camaraderie? During the 1980s and 1990s, Madonna and Elton John seemed to orbit the same dazzling universe of pop superstardom. Both were fixtures at award shows, both commanded headlines with every new release, and both cultivated reputations as fearless provocateurs who could reinvent themselves to match the cultural moment. Their paths crossed often. In 1985, both took part in Live Aid, the charity mega-concert that symbolized music's global reach. A decade later, they stood on the same stages at the Brit Awards, smiling for the cameras and, at least publicly, projecting the image of two icons united in their devotion to music. For fans, it was easy to believe they were allies. After all, both championed LGBTQ+ causes, often using their fame to push conversations about equality into the mainstream. The media helped amplify that narrative. Glossy magazines of the 1990s framed Madonna and Elton as pop royalty from different kingdoms, highlighting their shared flamboyance and fearless artistry. When they appeared at the same gala or award show, photographers made sure their images were placed side by side in coverage, suggesting solidarity rather than rivalry. Headlines like "Two Icons, One Stage" reinforced the illusion of camaraderie. Publicists also leaned into this narrative. As Madonna's Blonde Ambition Tour, 1990, shattered records, Elton's own touring juggernaut, bolstered by timeless ballads like "Candle in the Wind," offered a contrast rather than a conflict. Industry insiders whispered about mutual admiration, though the details of that admiration were vague at best. The illusion was powerful. To casual observers, it seemed inevitable that Madonna and Elton would form a friendship. Two global figures whose careers ran parallel, whose activism overlapped, and whose combined influence could shift culture. Fans speculated about collaborations, imagining a duet that would fuse Madonna's cutting-edge pop with Elton's piano-driven grandeur. Yet even in these moments of apparent unity, subtle cracks were visible to those looking closely. Elton's famously unfiltered commentary sometimes carried a sharper edge when he spoke about Madonna, though in the 1990s those barbs were easily dismissed as playful candor. Madonna, meanwhile, remained enigmatic, rarely speaking about Elton at all. Her silence was read as respect, but could it also have masked distance? Still, the public face of their relationship was carefully managed. Award shows positioned them in photo ops together. Charity events highlighted their shared activism. Journalists described them as fellow warriors in the pop battlefield. And for years, that was enough. The public believed in a bond, even if it was largely manufactured by proximity, publicity, and the irresistible allure of two legends appearing side by side. In those decades, the machinery of fame was adept at creating myths. A brief smile on the red carpet could be transformed into a headline about lasting friendship. A polite handshake at a gala could be reframed as evidence of solidarity. Madonna and Elton John, knowingly or not, became subjects of that myth-making process. For a while, the illusion held strong. Fans celebrated them as allies, industry magazines grouped them as peers, and pop culture embraced the fantasy of harmony between two of music's greatest names. Illusion hardened into truth. The illusion of solidarity between Madonna and Elton John began to weaken as the 2000s approached. What had once seemed like mutual respect gradually gave way to cutting remarks, public confrontations, and a widening gulf in how each approached their craft, their image, and their audience. The cracks, once faint, became impossible to ignore. At the heart of the rift was power, both artistic and commercial. Madonna's career had thrived on reinvention, from the boundary-pushing provocateur of Like a Prayer, 1989, to the spiritual experimentations of Ray of Light, 1998. Elton John, by contrast, had long emphasized musicality and consistency. When Madonna began dominating tours with elaborate choreography and provocative staging, Elton publicly questioned whether spectacle had overtaken substance. The first clear rupture came in 2002, when Madonna's single Die Another Day, the theme, song for the James Bond film of the same name, climbed global charts. At the Q Awards that year, Elton ridiculed the idea of Madonna being nominated for Best Live Act. His exact words, delivered to a stunned audience, were, "Madonna, Best Live Act, F-ush off. Since when has lip-syncing been live?" The comment was reported worldwide, with The Guardian and BBC News replaying the clip endlessly. For the first time, the feud left whispers and entered the record. 2 years later, the animosity deepened. In 2004, Elton again took aim during another award ceremony, referring to Madonna as a fairground stripper while criticizing her reinvention tour. His remarks didn't come from a tabloid leak or anonymous source. They came from his own mouth, broadcast live to an audience of millions. If there had been doubts before, they were gone now. Elton's disdain was no rumor. It was public record. Meanwhile, the pattern of absence became more visible. At major industry events, where both were present, such as the Grammy Awards and various charity galas, they were rarely photographed together. Seating charts placed them on opposite ends of the room. In group press photos, Madonna and Elton seemed to orbit in separate clusters, surrounded by their respective teams. It was no accident. Publicists quietly maneuvered to avoid confrontations, knowing any unscripted exchange might explode into headlines. On social media, silence spoke volumes. During the rise of Twitter in the late 2000s, Madonna refrained from mentioning Elton entirely, while Elton occasionally dropped comments in interviews that were picked up by online outlets and amplified by fans. By then, Team Madonna and Team Elton were informal camps that engaged in digital skirmishes, dissecting every quote for hidden meaning. The differences in work style only added fuel to the fire. Madonna was a perfectionist who rehearsed tours down to the millisecond, building massive productions that were equal parts concert and theater. Elton prided himself on musicianship above theatrics, believing that the piano and voice should always take center stage. These clashing philosophies weren't just artistic disagreements, they became personal digs when voiced in public forums. Interviews from this era highlight the growing gulf. In 2007, Elton told Time Out magazine, "Anyone who lip-syncs in public on stage when you pay $75 to see them should be shot." Though he didn't name Madonna directly, fans and journalists alike knew who his target was. In contrast, Madonna's rare responses were wrapped in poise, occasionally delivered as sly remarks during performances, but never a direct counterattack. This imbalance created a narrative. Elton as the aggressor, Madonna as the unbothered queen. The financial stakes also underscored the tension. touring revenue was exploding in the 2000s, with both artists among the highest-grossing acts worldwide. Reports from Billboard Box Score noted that Madonna's Sticky and Sweet tour, 2008, grossed over $400 million, setting a record at the time for a solo artist. Elton, though still a touring powerhouse, seemed overshadowed in the press. Was his criticism partly fueled by rivalry over numbers and prestige? By the end of the decade, the feud had become systemic rather than circumstantial. This was no longer about one offhand insult or a single disagreement over artistry. It was a pattern, a cycle of digs, silences, and competing visions of what it meant to be a true performer. The image of solidarity had evaporated, replaced by a rivalry that felt increasingly inevitable. Cracks were no longer rumors. If the early 2000s revealed cracks in the relationship between Madonna and Elton John, the following decade turned those fractures into headline-grabbing explosions. What had once been dismissed as playful ribbing or artistic disagreement escalated into one of the most notorious public feuds in pop history. The turning point came in 2004 at the Q Awards, where Elton's fairground stripper remark about Madonna's reinvention tour ricocheted across the globe. Tabloids from the Daily Mail to Rolling Stone splashed the insult in bold print, framing it as a shocking betrayal from one music icon to another. For many fans, this was the moment when illusion collapsed. The supposed camaraderie had curdled into open hostility. But the feud did not stop there. In 2012, Madonna released Masterpiece, a ballad featured on the soundtrack of her film W.E. The song earned her the Golden Globe for Best Original Song, an achievement that should have been celebrated as yet another jewel in her storied crown. Instead, Elton John, and more loudly, his husband David Furnish, reacted with fury. In an interview with CNN, Furnish declared Madonna's win was embarrassing and suggested the award had been rigged by politics rather than talent. Elton, when asked by reporters on the Golden Globe's red carpet whether Madonna stood a chance, snapped, "No foxing way." The dismissiveness was stunning, and the media immediately branded it as a continuation of their feud. The Guardian ran with the headline, "Elton John reignites feud with Madonna after Golden Globes." Fans erupted online. Hashtags like #Team Madonna and #Team Elton trended on Twitter as digital battle lines were drawn. Younger audiences rallied around Madonna, pointing to her record-breaking tours and cultural relevance. Elton's loyalists defended his candor, arguing he was merely speaking the truth about an artist whose reliance on spectacle overshadowed musicality. The Golden Globes, usually a glittering celebration of film and music, had become ground zero for a cultural war. What made the scandal so potent was how public it became. No longer confined to industry whispers or occasional digs at award shows, this feud was now dissected on talk shows, news outlets, and social media feeds worldwide. Entertainment Tonight aired side-by-side montages of their jabs, while think pieces in Variety and Billboard asked whether the feud reflected something deeper. A generational clash about authenticity, artistry, and survival in an industry obsessed with reinvention. Madonna, true to form, responded not with anger but with poise and a hint of irony. When asked about Elton's comments during her MDNA tour in 2012, she smiled and said, "I still adore him. He's a great artist. And I forgive him." The line, delivered on stage with a sly smile, was replayed endlessly. Some saw it as graceful, others as a masterclass in shade, positioning herself as above the fray while still stoking the fire. Meanwhile, Elton doubled down. In interviews that year, he continued to slam Madonna's performances, insisting she relied too heavily on lip-syncing. By this stage, their feud was no longer simply about artistic differences. It had become a global spectacle, with the press eager to amplify every word, every jab, every silence. The scandal surrounding the Golden Globes crystallized what many had long suspected. Madonna and Elton John were not friends, nor even neutral peers. They were rivals locked in a public battle for credibility, relevance, and cultural authority. For audiences, the fantasy of solidarity was gone. The mask shattered. In public, the aftermath of Madonna and Elton John's feud revealed not just the fragility of celebrity friendships, but also the way public rivalries can reshape careers, reputations, and cultural memory. What had once been dismissed as diva banter now carried weighty consequences for both artists. For Elton John, the feud reinforced his image as a fearless truth-teller. His willingness to openly criticize Madonna played into his long-cultivated persona as a musician who valued raw talent and authenticity above spectacle. To many of his supporters, his bluntness was refreshing. He had nothing to prove. By the 2010s, Elton had sold more than 250 million records worldwide, with classics like Your Song and Rocket Man cementing his legacy. Yet the controversy also painted him as combative, even bitter. Some critics argued that his repeated targeting of Madonna reflected insecurity, a need to assert dominance at a time when younger artists were rewriting the rules of pop stardom. Madonna, by contrast, benefited from her ability to absorb attacks and spin them into narratives of resilience. Her response to the 2012 Golden Globe incident, declaring she forgave Elton, was widely interpreted as regal, even mocking. It fit the archetype she had long embraced, the unflappable queen who stood above the noise. Her MDNA tour that same year grossed more than $305 million, making it the highest-grossing tour of 2012, according to Billboard Box Score. The numbers spoke louder than the insults. Still, the feud carried risks. Critics began to focus less on Madonna's artistry and more on her ability to provoke or withstand provocation. Headlines in Variety and The Telegraph shifted from praising her reinvention to cataloging her celebrity wars. Meanwhile, Elton's frequent jabs, though entertaining, occasionally overshadowed his music. Think pieces questioned whether audiences were paying more attention to their feud than to their latest records. The cultural impact extended to the institutions they inhabited. Award shows, once eager to pair them in group shots, began carefully managing logistics to avoid drama. Seating charts placed them apart. Joint appearances became non-existent. Even charity events, where both had been champions of HIV/AIDS activism, were subtly choreographed to keep them separated. Their absence from each other's orbit became almost as loud as their public words. Fans, too, bore the weight of division. Online communities debated endlessly about who was right. For younger Madonna fans, Elton's comments felt like a relic of a bygone era, an older musician unwilling to embrace pop's evolution. For Elton loyalists, Madonna symbolized everything wrong with modern celebrity culture: image over substance. What began as a feud between two stars evolved into a generational argument about authenticity, artistry, and survival. Media outlets capitalized on the drama. In 2013, Billboard ran an opinion piece titled "Pop's Feud Economy: Do We Need Rivalries to Keep Legends Alive?" The article suggested that while fans lamented the tension, the controversy kept both artists in headlines long after their commercial peaks. Conflict, it argued, was its own form of currency in the entertainment industry. And yet, there were flickers of reconciliation, or at least exhaustion. In 2016, Elton John appeared on The Graham Norton Show and hinted that the feud had been overblown, though he admitted, "I did say some things I regret." Madonna, for her part, never offered a direct truce, but her silence in later years suggested she had moved beyond the spectacle. Still, the absence of collaboration, the careful avoidance at events, spoke volumes. The feud left behind more than bruised egos. It altered the way both stars were perceived. Elton's candor became part of his legacy, for better and worse. Madonna's poise under fire bolstered her image as an untouchable icon. And together, their rivalry became a cautionary tale about how easily public narratives can overshadow private truths. The absence became a character. The story of Madonna and Elton John's fractured relationship endures not only because of the cutting remarks or the headlines it generated, but because it symbolizes a larger truth about celebrity culture, the ways in which Hollywood and the music industry at large packages intimacy, rivalry, and friendship as part of the product being sold. In the 1980s and 1990s, fans wanted to believe in a fraternity of icons. Seeing Elton and Madonna on the same stage or at the same event created the illusion of unity, a sense that pop's greatest stars were not only colleagues but companions. That illusion gave audiences comfort. If these titans could coexist, then music itself felt like a shared global celebration. Yet the feud stripped away that veneer, exposing just how curated and fragile these portrayals were. What remains most striking is how the feud became a template for later celebrity conflicts. The Madonna-Elton saga anticipated the highly publicized rivalries of the 2010s, from Nicki Minaj versus Mariah Carey on American Idol to Taylor Swift and Katy Perry's Bad Blood fallout. Media outlets had already learned how to monetize conflict, and fans had grown accustomed to choosing sides. In this way, the Madonna-Elton feud was not merely gossip, it was an early chapter in the evolution of modern fandom wars. Culturally, the feud also raised uncomfortable questions about authenticity. Elton's insistence on live performance over spectacle reflected an older guard of musicianship, while Madonna's mastery of reinvention embodied pop's embrace of performance as total theater. Their feud forced fans and critics to confront a fundamental question: what does it mean to be a real artist in an age where image is inseparable from music? The legacy, therefore, is double-edged. On one hand, it diminished the hope of solidarity among icons. Audiences who once imagined Madonna and Elton as allies instead saw them as evidence that ego and competition often outweigh friendship in the entertainment industry. On the other, it educated fans. Viewers became savvier, more skeptical of public narratives. The idea that a photo op equaled a friendship lost its power. By the 2010s, media literacy among audiences had sharpened. Fans could recognize the seams in the stories being sold to them. Even within their own careers, the feud lingers as a footnote. Elton John's later acknowledgement in a 2016 Graham Norton interview that he had said things I regret reframed his earlier comments as human rather than malicious. Madonna's refusal to fully engage cemented her brand as untouchable, simultaneously aggravating her critics and delighting her fans. Their feud became part of their mythologies. Elton, the outspoken critic; Madonna, the queen above the storm. Yet the larger cultural lesson is not about who was right or wrong, but about how fandom and media thrive on conflict. As one Billboard columnist observed in 2015, "We rarely remember the harmony of legends, but we never forget the feuds." That observation holds true today. Their strained relationship is remembered less for its resolution than for the spectacle it created, and the way it taught audiences to question the authenticity of celebrity friendships. In the end, Madonna and Elton John's legacy as rivals tells us as much about ourselves as it does about them. We crave stories of unity, but we consume stories of conflict even more eagerly. Their friendship was never quite real, but its collapse revealed truths about the machinery of fame, the economics of rivalry, and the hunger of audiences for drama packaged as entertainment. So we must ask, in a culture built on performance and spectacle, can celebrity friendships ever be real, or are they always scripted illusions waiting to fracture? So after decades of music, spectacle, and unforgettable headlines, what do we make of Madonna and Elton John's fractured bond? Was it ever truly a friendship, or was it always a rivalry disguised by the glitter of award shows and red carpets? The evidence suggests that beneath the glamour, the so-called alliance was fragile from the start, a performance shaped as much by the industry's desire for harmony as by the artists themselves. But now the question is yours. Do you believe Madonna and Elton John were ever real friends, or were they destined to remain rivals? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the discussion respectful and insightful. And if you enjoyed uncovering the untold truth behind this legendary feud, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more hidden Hollywood stories, because in the end even friendship can be scripted, but the drama it leaves behind is always real.